Welcome to the Fish House Nation podcast. We're at the St. Paul Ice Show, and we're visiting with Troy, Mr. Bluegill Peterson. Troy, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, man. Love to have you in our little house here talking fishing. And you're Mr. Bluegill, but today we're going to be talking walleye. And that was really kind of one of your first loves, the walleye. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, growing up on Lake Winnebago, which is kind of the lake or the Mille Lacs Lake of Minnesota. Winnebago is a walleye factory, and grandma and grandpa and uncles and all my cousins, you get done with school or get done with work, and we'd head out to the lake and go catch walleyes. Boy, if we would have had the stuff that we had 30 years ago, I don't think there'd be any walleyes left in that lake. We did our damage without any electronics and good gear, but now that we have it, it really makes fishing a lot easier. But some of the things I like to do is go back to the roots, just keep it simple, basic stuff, and I think this episode here is going to open the eyes, I think, for some of the guys.
Yeah, tell me about how you were catching them when you were a kid. How were you guys fishing Lake Winnebago in those days?
We didn't have electronics. We didn't have all the fancy custom painted stuff like we had today. We had basic, Rapala, countdowns, casting. If we were out on the ice, we were fishing slip bobbers with minnows, live bait stuff. And I still, to this day, go out with a dowel, a wooden dowel with 25 feet of line tied to it, and the big Swedish pimples. And that's it. No live bait, nothing. And that's what we grew up fishing. We used to catch fish all the time. The old timers, that's still how they just outfish us every day. And we've got every gizmo, gadget, and $200 rod and reel combos, and here they're out fishing us with wooden dowel from Fleet Farm for 59 cents. So it just goes to show it's how you fish versus what you have to fish with.
Yeah, in hunting we call that woodsmanship. I don't know what you call it in fishing.
I think for us it's called getting our butts kicked.
Today we wanted to talk about, you brought it up that you were you used minnows back in the day, but today we're talking fishing walleyes through the ice without live bait. What's kind of your favorite go-to method for that?
So, kind of going back to to the whole roots thing. So many baits have been developed over the years to, I think, more so catch the fisherman and not the fish. And once you learn how to fish a bait, I go and spend a lot of time in swimming pools, or even in my big aquariums, and watching to see how baits move. If you give them short snaps or real high pulls and letting them fall back down, just different jigging techniques. Watching and learning how these baits move and how the fish react to that movement makes you a better angler. Now, with walleyes, it's hard because those fish are so unattracted to cameras. You drop a camera down, you just pretty much sealed the deal as far as not catching any walleyes, because they just don't come up by the camera. But over on our system, we get a lot of white bass and crappies too that guys fish for, and the white bass aren't so much intrigued by the cameras. It doesn't seem to bother them as much. But when you can watch your bait and a fish at the same time, and how those fish react to how you're moving the bait, you can start to put the puzzle pieces together in your head and be like, okay, if I'm snapping it real lightly, these fish are coming up to it, but then they back away. So if I'm snapping it or just jigging real lightly and raising it up at the same time, making them chase it, now I'm getting their attention. And you can kind of almost anticipate the bite by watching both.
So you're using crappies, white bass as kind of practice dummies for for when you go walleye fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. And what will happen is, at least in our system, but I've learned how to fish on our system just because that's where I grew up, and I've taken those same tactics to Lake of the Woods, to Devil's Lake, to South Dakota, Montana, any place the walleye swims, I've gone and fished through them pretty much through the ice, and we're using the same techniques. And what's funny is, I can tell you a short story. We went up to Canada with Mike Olson from Fish Addicts, and went up to Flag Island. and get up into the northwest angle, and all their guides in there are making sure that everybody's got minnow heads and this and that. I'm like, I'm good. I'm just going to go out and fish my way. And by the end of the day, they're coming to me saying, what are you doing? We cannot catch fish, and you've got a pile of them on the ice. And just using bare spoons and knowing how walleyes react and what they're looking for. The same techniques works everywhere. Walleye's a walleye, just like a whitetail is a whitetail. When you figure out patterns and figure out where these big fish go, or big deer go, doesn't matter where you are. They're pretty much all the same.
When you're getting out in the water, you've kind of got your spot picked out. You're going to go out there. You're going to drill a hole. What's the first thing you're dropping down the hole?
First thing I'm going to drop down the hole is probably a Swedish pimple. Depending on the size of the fish that we know we're targeting, if obviously we're on Lake Erie or if we're on Lake of the Woods and we know there's big fish, I'm going to use something a little bit bigger. And depending on the size of the bait that they're used to eating, that's kind of going to determine what I'm going to be using too. Anywhere from a number 3 to a number 5 Swedish pimple. Typically, I'm going to have 3 colors: hammered gold, hammered copper, hammered silver. Those 3 colors are on pretty much every one of my rods. And from there, I might add a couple pieces of plastic or something like that, just for those little amino acids and a little bit of flavor. Something that's not going to fall off real easy, like a minnow head. But and they're not only that too, but if those fish are super finicky, those plastics with the little tails will just kind of sit there and vibrate just enough to kind of replicate a bug or something that they might be eating on. And but that's going to be it.
What's your favorite plastic to tip with?
I'm a big fan of those 13 Fishing coconut crabs. They've got a real wide body and then a nice finesse tail on it. And what's nice about that is on a treble hook, you can double hook that wide body and kind of position it however you want it to lay. If you want it vertical or 45 or perfectly horizontal, that bigger body with the nice finesse tail allows you to kind of work with that.
All right, so you dropped the Swedish pimple down there. You don't get the results you're after. Where are we going next?
So a lot of times what guys will do is they'll fish the fish that they see and not fish the fish they don't see. And that is probably the biggest mistake a lot of guys make, is you can get into an area and let's say we're on a nice rock reef with a good drop off that kind of drops off into a basin. Most guys are going to go drop a bait down and they're going to hit the bottom and they're going to work the fish on the bottom. Sometimes that works, Lake of the Woods or, northern Minnesota lakes, the fish relate to structure and they're usually cruising around on the bottom. Other times, the fish that are on the bottom are kind of like us. Humans and fish I relate to a lot of times. When we're full and we don't want to eat and we just kind of want to relax, what do? We go lay down on the couch and we sit there and watch TV and, just kind of relax. When we get hungry or thirsty, we get up and we'll go to the fridge, start, scavenging around, looking for something. Fish are no different. When they're done and they're full, they're gonna lay down on the bottom, just kind of relax. As they start to feed and get hungry, they come up off the bottom, start suspending, looking for food, and they'll sometimes be right underneath the ice. Sometimes they're in the middle of the water column. But so many people take their baits and keep their baits down on the bottom where they're seeing fish. And sometimes those fish will bite, sometimes they won't. But what they're not doing is those fish that are up eating, you got to remember your transducer cone is only seeing a small amount of water higher up in the water column versus down near the bottom. So what I tell my clients, and even when I'm out searching, I'm just going to use a 20-foot reference. If we're in 20 feet of water, my bait typically won't go below 12 feet. Especially if the water's fairly clear. Those fish, you got to remember where eyes are in walleyes. Walleyes' eyes are up on top of their head. They can see up very well, but they can't see down. So if we got baits that are up, kind of attracting them up halfway through the water column, if the fish that are hungry down on the bottom see that, they're going to come up and look at it. But the fish that are already up there, you're putting the baits in front of their faces, that may be off to the side 10, 20 feet, and you're just not seeing them, but they're seeing you. And those are the fish that come in and typically don't hesitate. They'll come in, you'll see a mark, and boom, it's on your line. Or other times you'll be, working a bait, and they'll come in, they'll get excited, and you start raising it and making them chase it, And I've had walleye swim damn near right up to the bottom of my hole and eat a bait in 20 feet of water and then turn right back around and go down. So work those fish that are up high in the water column. You might not see them, but they're there.
Mm-hmm. Is there another lure that you go to once you've kind of run your program and things are happening? What's the next step?
Yep. So if the fish are kind of not aggressive and they're not chasing those spoons, and they want more of a minnow style bait, then we'll go to like a jig and wrap style bait, or maybe a vibrating style bait like a shad wrap or something like that, something that's going to call in fish, or like a jig and wrap. You get a little bit smaller profile, a different profile. Now you're using a horizontal bait versus a vertical bait, and there again you can tip it with some plastic or whatnot. But it seems to me that when those fish do get finicky, they'll typically go lay down on the bottom, and you can take those minnow baits and swim them, by just small lifts, and you can make them swim, and then as they come out of the hole and kind of fall back down to the center, it's kind of like trolling in open water. You're making those fish kind of chase you a little bit, and a lot of times too, if they are finicky when they're down on the bottom, you got to drop your baits down there, wiggle them in the mud a little bit, kind of get those walleyes excited.
Yeah. And I think when people think about those type of lures, I think they're thinking those are kind of basically like fish calls. So are you dead sticking in conjunction with that, with another rod while you're working that one?
I very seldom have any live bait with me at all for dead sticking. I will have a couple rods laid out, almost like we're out on the deck of a boat, that if I'm throwing something down and I get a fish that's just hot on me but just doesn't commit, that's when I'll reel up a spoon or reel up the jig, the minnow style bait, and drop just the opposite down. And then when the days are like really finicky, then what I'll typically do is go to like a rocker minnow style, like a jig, or even some bigger tungstens, and just load them up with a bunch of wax worms or spikes, and drop it down, and just kind of jingle it in front of their nose. And sometimes that's all they need is just a little coaxing.
Yeah. How do you you work with a lot of clients, and I'm assuming most of them are probably novice anglers, and what you're describing before is a lot of those fish aren't on the flasher. You don't see them on your screen. How do you kind of break down and realize that maybe this isn't the right spot, even though you're fishing fish that you're not seeing?
So when we go out and fish, we don't camp on a spot for more than typically 15 to 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And for me, I'll get my clients set up, and then jump on my snowmobile, and I usually spend 2 to 3 minutes in a hole, and then we'll spend 15 to 20 minutes in an area, and it can be sometimes the matter of 5, 10, maybe 20 feet of a difference off of a break line can make all the difference in the world from even seeing fish, not even catching them, but just seeing them. Mm-hmm. And you just got to hop around. You got to move around. Being mobile is so much of what today is with anglers is portability and being mobile and versatile, and you gotta work at it if you want to catch them.
What are you using for rod and reel setup?
Now, I fish a little bit different than a lot of guys. I like longer rod and reels because I want to be able to work a fish a long ways up in the water column. So I'm usually sitting outside or inside a house, and with a 32 or a 34-inch rod, I can get my baits up quite high by lifting my arm up when they do start to chase. And not only that, but I can also drop my rod back down. So I cover a lot more water column fluently without having to open a bail or using the free falls. I love using the free falls because it's a lot smoother of a drop and raising it back up just by using your fingertip. When those fish are, start doing those chases, if you can keep that bait fluent and making those fish chase it naturally versus opening up a bail and moving your rod tip all the way around, and that bait's down there doing all kinds of crazy things, a lot of times that'll spook those weary fish. So longer rods, I use a braid pretty much for everything. Now, if we're fishing, deep water, I'm using like a 10 pounds. I use all the Seagar Smackdown stuff. Super, super thin braided line. Go to a number 1 Spro barrel swivel, and then usually like a 4 or 6 pound fluorocarbon leader, and then a quick change snap down at the bottom, just for being able to quick. A lot of times too, when you're fishing jigging wraps, those tails get busted off by the fish, and you got to quick change one off. So rather than sitting there and retie, you can just quickly put a new one on, and then usually like a medium action rod in the deeper water, because you want to be able to get that good hook set. When we're fishing shallower water, using same length rod, typically about a 34 or so, but a lighter action rod, and then I'll pretty much just go straight fluorocarbon, because one thing that you don't want to do is when you're fishing shallow water, 6-8 feet, is set the hook with something that has no stretch and rip the baits right out of the fish's mouth.
Right. How long a leader are you using?
Typically whatever the length of the rod is, so about a 3-foot leader.
3-foot leader. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you think is important?
The biggest key that I try and stress to guys is don't fish the fish that you see, fish the fish you don't see. Those are the ones that are, up in the water column feeding, and so many guys miss them. Versus fishing those fish on the bottom. You can always drop a bait down when you see fish on the bottom, but you can't raise a bait up if you don't see what's swimming right next to you. So just kind of keep, that's probably the most important tip that I can offer to guys is try and fish those areas that you're not seeing the fish, and I think you'll be surprised.
Awesome, Troy. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, buddy.
For doing the show, and again, good luck this year out on the ice.
Oh, I can't wait.
If people want to find out more about you, how do they find you?
Check out the Facebook. Just type in Mr. Bluegill. I'm pretty much everywhere on there. Otherwise, you can visit the website at mrbluegill.com, and all my contact info is there as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Troy. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.